Okay, what's up?
Here we are again.
Here we are again. It's been too long.
Yeah, round 4, I think, for me.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know we did it at work that one time.
Yeah.
We did it.
Was that your first one?
I think so.
That's
close to the first one, if not the very first one.
We're talking about investing.
Yeah.
And then we talked about
your gym.
The gym. And then we talked about
like Black Lives Matter, politics and stuff like that. So this is the fourth one, I'm pretty sure.
Sorry. I'm going to be sniffling a lot this whole time.
That's fine.
And coughing. Maybe I have coronavirus.
Maybe.
That's not funny. But anyway.
A lot has happened since that first one. The very first one we did was right when you started doing the gym. Yeah. And it was kind of like you had just bought it and you had just maybe like a month in.
I think it was, no, not even. Like from
really?
When I actually closed on it, it had been like 4 or 5 days.
Right.
Yeah. But since I've been working on it, like I started working on it like a month before I closed on it. So,
is closing on a business similar to closing on a house?
Actually, the whole process was really similar.
Yeah.
To closing on a house. The biggest difference was that there were no agents. And
right.
I'm sure in a bigger business there'd be like lawyers and
like a whole team. Yeah.
But it was just me and him. So we just negotiated whatever we wanted, right? Like it wasn't, you just added any provisions or taken anything out like that you wanted. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to do that with real estate. We're trying to buy our house right now, and it's like, actually, we want to change this one little thing. We want them to paint the wall white. Like, okay, I'll talk to them. I'll talk to their agent, and then they'll get back to you in a couple days.
And then there's like agent psychology of like, it's more important to them to close fast than to get the best deal. Right?
Yeah.
Whereas if it were like seller versus buyer, there's a bunch of different little things that are important. But for the agents, both the agents, it's like, I would need to get this commission ASAP.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so if it's like a couple $1,000s too high or too low, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Because they only get like 3% anyway, so it's like maybe a few $100s difference.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was another thing to take into account. My agent would say things like I liked her, she was great, but she would say things like, I think they'll really go for this, so why don't you try this? And it's like, okay, I appreciate the advice, but are you saying that so that we can close faster? Or are you saying that because it's really in our best interest?
I think that our agent does that as well. He always says things like, everything is cosmetic. It's like, oh, it's just like some paint, some drywall, some plaster. You'll fix that right up. Mm-hmm. And I don't think he's being deceptive either, but it is in his best self-interest to have things just be cosmetic. You know, it's like if there's a rotting wall versus a wall that needs paint, to him, that's the difference between getting or not getting the commission. So he would obviously want to tell us that things are just cosmetic.
Right. And if the price of the house changes by $10,000, it doesn't really change the agent's commission, like hardly at all. Mm-hmm. But if the deal falls through, then they just spent, a month for nothing.
Well, I've thought about that. This is something that I guess I didn't really understand. So a buyer's agent, they get a commission based off of the sale price, right?
Yeah.
So wouldn't they be incentivized to keep the sale price as high as possible?
Yeah, but it's not that much of an incentive because they usually get 3% of the sale price. So on a $300,000 house, I don't know, that's $9,000, right?
Right. Yeah.
I think.
Uh-huh. Yeah. 1% would be $3,000.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, so it's $9,000. So that's a decent amount of commission. But the difference between a $300,000 house and a $315,000 house is,
I mean,
in my head, I don't know.
It's like what, $3,150 for 1%. So it'd be 90. What's 150 times 3? 750. So it'd be 9,750. 9,700. So that's $750.
I mean, it's not nothing, right?
Right.
But it'd be better for an agent, like, let me get this over with so I can move on to my next $9,000 commission instead of squabbling over a few $100s.
Well, I guess it's for sure not in their best interest, though, to try and get a lower price if that is going to affect whether or not they get the job or the sale. Because for them, they're like, getting it is the only thing that matters. So they don't care if it's a little bit more or a little bit less. But for you really care that it's a little bit less if you're buying.
Yeah, like, because $10,000 in a mortgage is like not that much. Maybe like between $75 to $150 a month. It's like not a huge deal.
Yeah.
So on either party, it's not that big of a deal. But if we're talking like the difference between this house sold for $330 and this exact one It's probably going to sell for 300. That's a big difference for you. Not that big a difference for
Yeah.
the agent, you know?
Yeah, and it's also interesting, the psychology for us as a buyer versus the seller, where they're just cashing out. I don't even think they're not rolling it into another house. The situation that we're in, there's a woman who died in a resting home, and her 4 kids have ownership of the house, so they're just like trying to get rid of it. Mm-hmm. And so, and we're trying to negotiate them to give us some credits so that we can fix up part of the house. So they're like, hey, we'll give you like $10,000, you can remodel it, but we're going to keep it at this high price. And then we're like, well, what about 15? And then what about 18? What about 20? The back and forth and all that. And it's interesting because $10,000 or $15,000 in cash to me right now, in order to renovate this house, is a big deal.
Oh yeah.
That's like all of our costs, And when we say 15 and they say 10, to us, $5,000 extra dollars that are going right towards renovating this house is like a game changer, right? I mean,
yeah, for sure.
That's painting the whole house. Is $3,000 to do that. So it's a big deal. But to them, $5,000 at the end of a $300,000 paycheck. I mean, I don't know how much they owe on it, but
right.
It's kind of funny that they would even negotiate, because they're like, wow, we might lose this deal over $5,000 of that's less than 1%.
Right.
But to us, it's huge. It's kind of funny that they would even fight back on that. It seems like you got a lot of power as a buyer, more than I realized that you had, because I've never bought a home before.
It also depends on the property.
Yeah.
It depends on... I think I had more power than I realized when I was buying my gym. Mm-hmm. I think I could have gotten a way better deal, even though he had like 4 different offers, and it had only been listed for a week. But in talking with him after, like one of the offers wanted to turn it into a yoga studio, and just use the equipment or whatever. I don't even know. Somebody else wanted to
use like all this super heavy weight to make a yoga couch.
What they were thinking, but and somebody else, he was saying, wanted to just flip it, like, because they had discussions. Somebody else wanted to buy it and put value into it and then flip it, right?
Do you have to tell him what you're going to do with it?
No, they were just talking.
Right.
Because anyways, I was the only one, according to the conversation that he and I had, that actually wanted to keep it a strength gym and keep the clientele and all that stuff. So I had a lot more power than I realized, but he, I guess, played his cards pretty well. Yeah. But yeah, the interesting thing about buying the business is I wrote the contract. Mm-hmm. I think we talked about this last time we talked about this, but I literally wrote the whole thing myself, so I could have just put in anything I wanted. And it's like when I go to an agent and say hey, can we change this? It's like, okay, well, let's add an addendum, and then we'll do additional signatures. But for me, I just had to go change the Word document that I wrote, Yeah. Or for him, he's like, hey, I don't like how you worded this, and it's like, okay, delete it, change it. Yeah. We could literally do anything we wanted.
I think that's a revelation to a lot of business owners, is that they can do anything they want.
Right. Yeah.
Because as an employee, you walk into your first job at Sears, and it seems almost like such an established, traditional, rule set type environment. You walk into Panda Express, and they're like, hey, you have to cook it this exact way. You wear this. This is just how it's done here. And it doesn't feel like you can question anything, and you probably can't.
Right.
But it is funny to think that at the top, there's someone that's just like, I don't know, what should we have them wear? Right. I don't know, probably just a black shirt, black pants.
Or the size of the broccoli,
Yeah, I don't know, I don't care. Just say 3/4 inch.
Somebody's we used to have 1.5 inches. Somebody said we should do 3/4. All right.
I don't know, YouTube it.
Have you read Richard Branson's book? It's
called
The Virgin Way. It's really good. I liked it. But he said for the first few years of his businesses, because he started doing the record business, right? Virgin Records. And he said his motto was just, screw it, let's do it.
I like that.
And people would just come with ideas hey, I think we should do this. I don't know, what if we put a little nook in the corner of the record store so people could just look through records, put some beanbag stuff. He's like, yeah. And he just he said almost every idea. He's like, why not? Obviously there were some dumb ones, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Those things, they almost feel like they're a fixture of nature. You walk on a mountainside and you assume it's always been that way. When you walk into a Nordstrom, you're just like, oh, like this is just the way it came. Like this building, all these things, and you don't realize that every little thing was put there by someone whose job it was to do that, and is totally negotiable and changeable, and actually changing constantly.
Right.
And when you get older, you start to realize that, like your favorite places at the mall all of a sudden are gone and there's a new place. And then like your uncle runs a taco stand and you realize that, he's just putting Tabasco in it. And you're like, oh, like I didn't think it was, a business was just like a person,
right?
A group of people just making decisions. And when you get a real job, like a corporate job, and you actually see what's going on and you see, oh, this is everyone. Like
right. This is who makes all the calls.
Like this company is all over the world making hundreds of millions of dollars, and I'm in a room with literally everyone who makes those decisions in the entire company. And it's weird.
It was interesting being at Singular because me and Ty built the team, right? Mm-hmm. That you guys are now, like, there's all this infrastructure, which is funny because, anyway, we won't go into all of that.
Right.
But it was interesting to watch of like, at first it's like, okay, we'll just call all these people. And like we built like the curriculum, we wrote the documents, we created the training program. And then like when we hired on the new wave of people, it's like, well, this is the thing we built, guys.
Yeah, this is the way it came.
Right.
But it wasn't.
Right.
You made it out of nothing.
And there were certain things, it's like, well, I don't know what I think about this. Like I kind of have an issue. It's like, okay. And then we just go change it. It's like,
I know. It's so strange. There's a Steve Jobs quote about this, which I love. And he said, paraphrasing, something like, reality is malleable. And the moment you realize that everything in your reality was created by people that are no smarter than you is the moment that you can change reality. I think that's so cool. And really inspiring and also kind of disheartening, because I always like to think that, like someone who's invested in real estate and makes millions, or someone who's started a business and makes millions or whatever, they may not have any skill that I don't have. They may not be smarter. They may not be even more hardworking or anything. The difference is they just did it. Right. And they may have those things, and I'm sure they do. But, like Grant Cardone, what is the difference between him and someone like me or like you? Well, he's done those things. He read those books. He took those chances. And now that's just who he is. And again, like Nordstrom, you show up and you think, oh, there's this guy. He's established. This is just the way this guy is. But the truth is anyone could do any of those things. Yeah. It's not like the NBA. You don't have to be 6'10". Right. It's just like people just deciding to do stuff, doing it, failing, fixing it, iterating, and succeeding. And it's
I read
interesting.
A quote similar to that. I don't remember who said it. Some author that I looked up his book that I didn't buy. But he said, and I'm just going to paraphrase it, but he said something along the lines of, nobody on earth is better than you. He said, like, not the Pope, not even, maybe not, but probably Richard Branson, is what he said. He said they simply believe something that you don't yet believe, have learned something that you haven't yet learned, and are doing something that you're not doing. And all of those things are changed very easily.
I love that.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Well, that's really true. I mean, I've come to the conclusion that like hard work or perseverance or any of those things are almost like a faith-driven thing, because it takes a certain belief to think. It's not just like the grit. It's not just like how much pain can I push through, but it also is believing that will actually result in what you want, which is hard. It's easier with some things.
I don't know if you were there for this conversation. I think you were. We were talking with Cree about raising the prices on her nails again. She and I have had that conversation for months.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to get at the heart of what it was that was keeping her from doing it. And in her mind, it was like, well, I just, these are my friends. Like, I don't really feel like charging them more. It's like, okay, whatever. But we finally got to it, like me and Dad, where she was, like, we talked about the reasons why, we talked about the amount of work she wants to do, the amount of value she's bringing, all that great stuff. Mm-hmm. And it got to the point where we were like, look, like, you're literally overbooked for every single appointment you have. That means that you're charging too little. Like, if anything in the market will tell you that means your prices are too low.
Yeah.
Right? Uh-huh. And then if the heart of it was just like, I just don't know if I'm my stuff is really that valuable. And it's just 100% a belief thing.
Yeah.
I think she literally said those exact words, like, I just don't know if what I'm doing is actually that valuable. So now we figured out what the issue is. Now we just got to attack her belief system.
Yeah.
Which is hard to do when she's puking all the time.
And the belief system stems from something that it's like you get that belief from some experience, but a lot of times you're pulling it from the wrong experience. Like with her, the experience that she should be pulling it from is, I'm overbooked. The market is telling me I'm too cheap. Mm-hmm. You know, like if I charge more, then I'll have less clients and I'll work the right amount instead of being overbooked. But she gets her belief from most likely her experiences, how much she's paid in the past, how much a friend that's about the same quality charges, right. You know, how much she's willing to spend on it. I don't know.
Right.
But she's not getting her belief from the market.
Right. Which, have you heard of imposter syndrome?
Yeah.
You know what that is? Mm-hmm. I was talking about that with a friend of mine, actually, he's the CEO of this software company. Mm-hmm. Right? Same age, we went to high school together, and he was like...
That's sweet.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's not a very big software company, but still.
Yeah.
He's doing pretty well. And he was like, I'm terrified that somebody's going to find out that I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
He's like, I started the company, like, I built this whole thing, like, when we hired all the people, so he, like, obviously he deserves to be there. You know, he's like, we've hired on programmers that are way better programmers than I am. And I think one day somebody's just going to be like, I should be doing your job.
Yeah.
You know? And even if that were the case, it doesn't matter. But it doesn't mean that you don't feel like that.
Well, again, that's what I was just saying. Like, that kind of ties in the two things we're just saying. That you can do whatever someone else is doing. You just don't do the same things or believe the same things or know the same things. So, like, that guy probably could be the CEO. And then the other thing is you're getting your belief from the wrong place. And that's kind of an example of both. Because your friend is probably getting his belief in what a CEO is from an experience that's not very good.
Right. Or people that he's worked for, or like what they looked like, or how many kids they had.
Yeah.
Or like what they wore to work, that kind of stuff.
You know, like people that think that they're a bad mom, they got their belief from what a good mom is from a really weird source a lot of the time, like Pinterest or Instagram or movies. And they're like, I can't, I'm doing everything. I feed and drive them around and all this stuff. I'm being super mom. And I just still feel like a bad mom. It's like, well, who are you emulating? Like, where did you get that idea that a mom even had to do those things?
Right.
Probably their mom.
I think most people that feel like they're bad moms, if they're honest with themselves and they looked back at what their mom was like, she's not as perfect as they think she is.
Yeah.
But, not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but it's interesting because with the latest business that I just started, I literally did not know how to do a single thing. I thought I did, which, like the consulting, for startups. So when I decided to start it, I was like, I've read a lot of books about getting investment funding. I'll just go tell people that I can help them out and see who comes, right? And I pretty quickly got booked. Like I can only handle 3 clients, and I got 3 clients in the first week, and I've just been working with those 3 now for 3 weeks. But every single step, I've had to learn how to do it because I have investors in my network, and I'm like, how hard could it be? I'll find out. We'll work on their pitch deck and their business plan, and when it's ready, I'll just show it to my friends that are investors, and somebody will put money into it, or if I can't get any of my people that I already know, I'll just reach out to new people. It's seems pretty simple, right?
Yeah.
The first thing that we came up against was a cap table, which I have no idea what that was. Do you know what a cap table is?
No, I've never heard of that.
It's really pretty simple. It's actually just who owns what percentage of your company, right? And it changes as you bring on more money, right? Not just because... So your company is here, it's worth a certain amount, and every part of it is spoken for.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not that when you add a new group of people, it's not how much percent do you want to give up? I'll give up this percent. You give up a certain percent, and we'll find a good 10% to give to an investor.
I've wondered actually how that works.
That's kind of how I always thought it was. It's all the founders are okay, well, so I own 100%, but we want to bring on somebody else, so I'll give you 80, and then just having those conversations. That's not how it works at all. It's just this company stays exactly the same and the percentages stay exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
And you just add on this chunk over here, and now the company is worth this much, and the investor got all of that much.
So basically, you're watering down everyone else's shares.
Yeah, but all at the same rate.
Right.
It's like, so if my company, and they get this wrong on Shark Tank all the time, not the investors, but the people that are trying to get money.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I've ever seen somebody that got this wrong get money. Right? Mm-hmm. They'll come in and say, I'm looking for $1.5 million for 10% of my company, right? What that means is that $1.5 million is 10% of the value of your company as a whole.
Right. Yeah.
So let's just make it one, right? To make it easy, it means that your company right now is worth $9 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
Say
those numbers again.
So let's say instead of 1.5, let's say it's just 1%. Or
okay.
1 million, sorry.
1 million for what percent of the company?
10%.
Okay.
So if an entrepreneur comes out and says, okay, I want $1 million and I'm willing to give you 10% of my company.
Okay.
Right? Mm-hmm. In their head, they're thinking, I need $1 million and 10% is the amount of my company that I'm willing to give up.
Right.
But what they're not understanding is that what they're saying or what they're implying is that my company right now by itself without your money is worth $9 million. And then you're adding an extra $1 million, making it worth $10 million total. And because you brought $1 million, you get 10% of that.
Oh, interesting. Because I guess that makes sense. I had always thought of it like, we think our company is worth 10 million and we'll give you 10% for $1 million. But instead what they're saying is, we think it's worth 9 million, but with your $1 million, it'll be worth 10, which is 10%. Okay.
So there's the pre-money and the post-money valuation.
Mm-hmm.
And the pre-money valuation is, what is our company worth right now without any investor money?
Mm-hmm.
And then once you put in your money, how much is it going to be worth? And then the percentage that you're getting is based on the post-money valuation.
Well, I guess that makes sense because by putting money into a company, you're making that company more viable.
Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I'd never really thought about that.
Yeah, so what usually happens is like, I mean, not to get super into the nitty gritty, this is all stuff I've learned in the last month.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the last 3 weeks. When you start a company, you issue a certain number of shares,
mm-hmm.
right? Like 10 million shares. And if you're the only one, it's like, well, okay, I own 10 million shares of this company. You could say that. Or what you normally do is you say, okay, I'm going to give myself 1 million shares, and then there's 9 million that are open. But since they actually are not owned by anybody, I own 100% of the company.
I see.
That makes sense?
Uh-huh.
And then, like, if you just end up doing the whole thing by yourself and you never give away any equity, then it never accounts to anything and you always have 100% of the company, even though there's another, 9 million shares out there that aren't owned.
How do you choose how many shares? Is it arbitrary?
Arbitrary. And you can issue any more at any time.
So I know this is always kind of never made sense to me. Because it's like if you can issue more at any time, kind of seems like you're printing your own money.
Kind of. Yeah. Well, so the difference is that, and this is why money gets devalued. It's the exact same thing. So let's say I have a public company like Google,
mm-hmm.
right? And it's like, we need to raise some money. So we need to issue some more shares so people can buy more.
Right.
Because typically what happens is like people just trade the shares that are already out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, we're going to issue another 5 million shares. I don't know how many shares Google there are. Probably hundreds of millions. I have no idea. Probably not hundreds of millions.
I don't know.
But there's a lot. But anyway, it's like, okay, we're going to issue 10 million more shares so we can sell them so we can raise some more money for the company, as opposed to adding more value so that the share price goes up,
mm-hmm.
right? Then everyone that holds a share already, their percentage ownership gets diluted,
mm-hmm.
right? So typically the board of directors will say like, nope, we're not going to do that. Because if I own like 0.8% right now and you issue another 10 million shares, I'll only own like 0.5%. And then the value of my vote goes down and then I don't get to put on the board of directors who I want to. So anyway, so that was one thing I didn't know anything about that I like as soon as I was like, hey, let's get your company ready to put investors into it. They're like, okay, this is what our cap table looks like. And I was like, great. Yeah, let me...
It's a really good cap table you got there.
Let me watch some videos. And I was talking with... Well, so my first item of business, I wanted to build a network of investors first before I started trying to get clients to then, because it'd be a lot easier to say, oh, these are the people that I should introduce you to, as opposed to, shoot, we got to go find people to introduce you to.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So I was talking with some people. I had like a investor partner worksheet of like different questions that I was going to ask. And one of them was like, what would disqualify a company from being considered? And then there are some obvious things like, well, we don't ever invest in mobile apps, for example, you know. But one of them that I heard a lot was like, well, we take a look at the company's cap table, and you know, depending on their cap table management, like we don't want to be involved with somebody who doesn't know how to manage their cap table.
What is the cap table in relation to what you were just talking about?
It's just that, so capitalization table is just saying who owns what percent.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So if, for example, the first company I started working with, they said their valuation was around $8 million, which is really optimistic on their part. And they said they wanted to raise $5 million. And it's like, okay, guys, think about this. If it's worth $8 million now and you're raising $5 million, then that means it's going to be worth $13 million after. So that new investor is going to get like 40-something% of the company. I'm
going to say they're almost doubling the company.
Right. It's
not
like,
quite, but
there's no investor on earth that's smart that wants to be given 40% of the company, because it means that you haven't built enough value on your own and you don't know what you need the money for. You know, so that's what we worked into that. I talked him down into $2.5 million raise instead of $5 million. And then we talked about different ways to build up the valuation that they already have. So that's what we're working on right now. But all that stuff I learned like in the last 3 weeks or so.
Dang, that's crazy. I just finished Bob Iger's biography, the CEO of Disney.
Oh, yeah.
And it is super interesting because, I mean, being the CEO of Disney, which is a bunch of different companies, he's over, you know, Pixar, Lucasfilm, ABC, like all these different things. And so
ESPN for a little while.
ESPN. And it's very interesting, the dynamic between him and the board when they're going to go do an acquisition, because again, this is kind of something I don't totally understand, but you know, when they acquired Pixar, they traded Pixar stock for Disney stock, all the people at Pixar. So now they own a big portion of Disney stock, and Pixar stock, I guess, is just dissolved.
Yeah, probably. My guess is that they probably just bought all the assets and liquidated the company.
Yeah, so it's funny.
Or dissolved the company.
Yeah, they basically
just my guess.
with Pixar, it was really interesting actually, because Pixar and Disney actually already had a partnership, and then it went sour with one of the CEOs and Steve Jobs. Long story short, the new CEO Bob Iger came in and was like, "Hey, let's clear the air. You had a bad relationship with us in the past," and Pixar was exploding. This is around the time, you know, kind of in the beginning, Toy Story, Monsters Inc., Bugs Life, like the classics were all just made. Disney had the rights to all the sequels legally, but had nothing else. And then Pixar had the right to make whatever movies they wanted. And so Disney could have literally just made Toy Story 2 without even asking Pixar, which is crazy. They could have done whatever. They could have gone totally different actors. You could have done a live action. And so anyway, the reason why I went down this path is because what they ended up doing was, after that CEO left, Bob Iger basically was like, "Steve, we don't want to change Pixar at all. We're not even going to call it Disney Pixar in the movies. Basically, we want you to stay the exact same, and we want you to run it, but we want the money from it, essentially. We don't want to fight anymore. You need us because we're huge, and we need you because you're way better." And so Steve overnight becomes one of the largest shareholders in Disney and is like the head of their board, even though he like had never worked for Disney or anything, because he owned basically all of Pixar. So when they transferred all that stock, now it's like CEO Bob Iger and Steve Jobs running Disney.
Interesting.
It's weird to think of, you know, because you're the CEO of ESPN. I don't know if there's a CEO, but like you are the, you know, media head, executive, whatever. And then all of a sudden your boss totally changes, and it's now like Steve Jobs,
right,
who is like the most notorious businessman of all time.
Yeah. That's interesting. I don't remember why I brought up that I went and learned all this stuff about cap tables. But there was a point I think that we were getting at.
I don't remember either.
Oh, imposter syndrome. We were talking about that.
Oh, yeah.
And he was saying like he doesn't feel. My friend was saying that he doesn't feel like he was fit to be CEO. And for me, like I struggled with that a little bit when I was doing insurance, specifically because like I knew everything about insurance. Like I passed the test. You know, and that's like the most important thing. But it's like this is like insurance. Like this is what adults do. I'm like 23.
Yeah.
You know?
That's what I feel like every time I go into a car lot to buy a car. Like everyone knows everything about cars besides me. And they're going to oversell me. And
which is, I don't know how like I got over it. Maybe it was just like giving a name to it and realizing that's what I was feeling. But I don't feel that at all anymore. Even though this time I really am kind of an imposter. Like I don't really, if somebody came out and said like, you know what, before I asked you didn't know anything about cap tables, did you? I could be like, no, I didn't.
No, you're totally right.
So people like actually, the interesting thing, and actually this was kind of a defining moment for me, this was about a week and a half ago. I picked up my third client. It was 2 weeks ago. And I wanted them to pay me $3,000 up front, and then a percent of the money that we raised together, right? And they had another company, like a big company, that wanted them to go with them to help them raise the money, right? And I honestly, I'm not sure why they picked me, but I was on the phone with the CEO, and he was like, so what have you like, is there somebody else I can talk to of like who you've worked with? And I was like, here's the thing, I'm just getting started. Like I literally, you guys are my second client. They're actually my third client, but the first one's a real estate development company, so it's not similar. Because they're looking for a private lender instead of an equity partner. So I was like, you guys are literally my second client, and this is my background. I've been running like a networking mastermind for about 2 years, and a bunch of those guys have started up their own companies, and we've spent time, you know, going over their pitches and going over like the different things. I volunteered at like the entrepreneurship club at my university, like, and we would go over the different ways to like raise your valuation and how to like optimize your pitch deck. Like that's what I've done. And so I told them, like, if it makes you feel more comfortable, we'll waive the $3,000 up front, and then we'll just slightly change our agreement on the back end. So I'm getting 3% instead of 2% of, you know, what the money that we raise. And he was like, let me get back to you. And then he texted me the next day. He's like, I just paid you $3,000 invoice. Let's go.
So we still ended up doing it.
Yeah, so we ended up doing it. And the other company was like, the other thing we talked about was like, he said, you know, this other company I'm talking to, they tell me they have, I think it was like 240 like venture capital companies like in their phone book, you know, that they could just call up and say, hey, what do you think about this company? And he was like, well, do you have anything comparable to that? And I was like, no, I don't. Like what I have is, I know a couple dozen people, like personal connections that invest, that are angel investors. And then I have energy, and I have a really heavy work ethic. You know, I was like, I'm going to get you your money. Like I'm going to make calls for days if that's what it takes. Like I'll go to conventions, you know, we'll put together your pitch, and like once it's ready, like I'm on your team. Like I'm not going to be I'm not going to own equity in your company, right? I'm not going to be on your pitch deck of like, this is the team. But like, except for those two things, like I'm your man. You know, like if you go to a big company, they're like, you guys are only trying to raise $3 million, which to a private equity firm, that's small potatoes. Like sometimes they're investing $750 million in something, you know, $100 million. So like their junior associates are going to get your job, you know, and they're going to be working from 9 to 5, right? And like that kind of thing. And there's like going to be all these forms you have to fill out. And it's like with me, like it's just me. I don't have an assistant. I don't have any other team members, but like I'm in it. Like I work 80-hour weeks, and you guys are going to get 40 hours of that because you're my second client, right? And like you can text me anytime. And like for some reason that like won them over. You know, I don't know why, because I don't have what the other guys had. But just being open about it and not trying to pretend like I'm some big shot, I didn't feel any imposter syndrome at all. Yeah. You know, I didn't feel like I was trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes or like. So now we're in it. You know, we just actually like 5 hours ago we finished their executive summary, and Monday we're going to start calling investors.
That's so awesome.
So, yeah, I'm excited. The other company's going to take longer because they've got a whole bunch of issues. But anyway.
I think that is kind of the backwards way that imposter syndrome is solved. You need kind of two opposing forces, which is one, the confidence pulling your belief from the right source that you can do it. You're no different than someone else who can do it. And also the honesty to know exactly how well you can do it.
Yeah.
And the openness and the vulnerability and courage to be able to actually express that, It's like me with this podcast. I, like most people, I think used to get nervous going into job interviews or going, on first dates, or I know I'm going to go meet someone really cool, go hang out with new friends or whatever, because there's a sense that I had to show up as a certain person that in some way was not congruent with who I felt I was. And it was similar, it's like, I got to be the cool version of myself. Like, I'm going to go be with this girl, like, it'll still be me, but like, it's like the confident version of me or the swag version of me. Or I'm in this, job interview, and now I have to bring forward, like, I have to have quick vocabulary. I have to like look them in the eyes all the time, and I have to show them. And it's not that it's disingenuous, but when you can actually say to yourself, well, I can just show up, and I'm confident that the person that'll show up will be good enough, but also I'm not going to try and manipulate which person shows up.
Right, and there's parts of it that I recognize aren't going to be good enough, and there's no reason for me to lie about that.
Yeah. And as soon as I did that, that's why I don't get nervous like with podcasts, like I thought I would, because I think a part of it is just what people like about podcasts is that you're just hearing exactly what people are like. Right. You're not hearing like their coolest stuff, I guess, necessarily. And so I'm like, oh, sweet. It might even be better. People could relate to it better if they realize the dorky things about me, or like the insecurities or the things I'm not good at, because they'll relate to it. And so it just eases that tension. It's like, oh, whatever happens. If something happens and it's coming genuinely from me, then that's genuinely me. So like I do whatever I want. Like I'm right no matter what,
It's funny because I kind of took it a little bit too far at Singular, I think. When I was a regional sales manager, I felt like a little bit of that at first. And I was like, I've never been a network marketer. Like, I don't know exactly how to...
What's up? Okay, all right, we'll just finish this thought.
Yeah, we're almost done. I was like, I've never been a network marketer. I don't know how to build a network marketing business. And now I'm trying to counsel these people. And like, when they were starting out, like silver managers, it was easy. And it was also pretty easy later on because it's basically the same stuff. Mm-hmm. But at first I was like, I don't know how to do this, And so my first... couple presentations I did like at Sundance or Park City, I actually built errors into my PowerPoint on purpose so that people would relate to me because they saw that I was just a genuine human being, which I think might be taken a bit too far.
It's funny. It's like kind of like reverse, being disingenuous about how genuine you are.
Right. Like there were certain slides that like I knew exactly how they fit because I was really meticulous about how I put together my PowerPoints. Mm-hmm. But there were certain parts where I was like, okay, on this part, when I go to the next slide, I'm going to pretend that I think that this slide is supposed to go here. So I go to the next slide, it's like, oh, I guess I forgot a slide. Like little things, like little stupid things like that.
Yeah.
So that I would seem more relatable, so that I could like get closer to people and coach them because they trust me. Maybe it was taken a little too far. And then I get to that slide later and it made perfect sense where I put it. It's like, oh yeah, there it is. That's why,
That's funny.
But
that's really funny.
I still do that. Actually, I did that when I was painting as well because I'd never painted houses before. I didn't know anything about painting. And I booked all the work before I actually painted my first house.
Right.
Right? And so these people had to trust that I could paint their houses and make it good and that it was worth giving me $7,000 to $10,000 when I literally never painted a house before. And I remember one specific guy who actually had a contractor that he had just finished working with who landscaped like his whole backyard. And he was like, yeah, he told me he can paint it, and his price is actually cheaper than yours. Like, why would I go with you? He just asked me that straight up, like sitting at his kitchen table. I was like, here's the thing. I'll be 100% honest with you. I have never painted a house like this before. But I really want to paint your house. I was like, this is a really cool house. Like, it was really big. It was the biggest one that I'd even estimated at that point. And it was a stain job, not a paint job, which is a lot more complicated. And I was like, I'm doing this because I am learning entrepreneurship. Like, this is kind of like an internship for me. Not really. Like, I own this business, right? But it's like, I really want to paint your house. Like, this is a really cool house. It'll be a huge experience for me. And like, the greatest thing about it is that like, I'm going to write into my contract 100% satisfaction guarantee. Like, you can be out there on the job site with me every day and you can correct me on anything you want to. You won't have to, because we're gonna do a really good job. But like, I'll tell you the truth. Like, I've never done this, but I really super want to paint your house because I really like it. You know? And he was like, okay. And
Sounds good.
He wrote me a check for $5,000. Like, it kind of blows my mind. But just like being honest with people and being open and just being yourself is, yeah, I think it's the antidote to imposter syndrome, and it's the way to build up those beliefs. Like,
and build up true confidence, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
If someone that's listening wants to like find you to find investors, how do they find you?
Good question. They can't book me right now because I literally can only handle 2 clients at a time because it's just me.
Okay.
But when I'm done with my other, when the time comes, if either I expand my operations or when I'm done with one of the current clients, it's called Fletcher Startup Consulting.
Mm-hmm.
We're on Facebook, LinkedIn.
Sweet.
Yeah. The people that have found me so far was just LinkedIn. They messaged me on LinkedIn. And the crazy thing, so I've probably had 180 to maybe 200 people reach out to me and say, hey, look at my pitch deck. Like, can you help me find investors? And I haven't done any marketing. Literally 0.
Interesting.
Yeah. I put it in my bio on LinkedIn, helping startups find investors.
Dang, that's
and
awesome.
maybe people just have like keywords or searches or something.
Probably.
But anyway. It's
cool.
It's
awesome. Well, we'll cut this one short because we got to take off to dinner. But
okay. Sounds good.
Thanks.